Part 53. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 521. After talking in the room for a while, Minister Yan achieved his goal and pulled Xiaopingan into the team. Minister Yan also breathed a sigh of relief. This watch is the special communication watch of our order committee. It is considered a high-tech equipment. The watch can connect to satellites and you can wear it on your body. If there is a mission, this watch will display mission information. You can also use this watch to communicate with us. Contact, the positioning function on the watch can be actively turned on or off. After Xiaopingan put away the boundary beads, Minister Yan handed over another silver box. Xiaopingan opened the box. There was a black steel band sports watch in the box. It looked cool. Xiaopingan directly put the watch on his wrist. As a member of the former order committee, he put on the order again. The equipment of the committee, the feeling, is very special. Fang Lingqian and Xiaopingan next to him talked about how to use the special service communication watch, and Xiaopingan immediately mastered it. This thing is indeed a high-tech thing. It can connect to the low-orbit satellites of Great Yan in Europe on the surface and in the room for encrypted communication. The watch can absorb kinetic energy and light energy and convert it into energy. It also has a built-in high-energy battery, which is waterproof, shockproof and radiation-proof. Has a biometric function, and after the watch is bound to Xiaopingan, others cannot use it. It is a higher level than the customized mission phone that Xiaopingan used before in Dian Kingdom. If you need other special equipment, you can ask it and we will try our best to satisfy it, Fang Lingqian said. Well, that's enough, I have no other needs. Xiaopingan looked at the special service watch in his hand, turned off the satellite positioning function of the watch in front of the two of them, and asked, "What tasks do I need to serve now, what?" Fang Lingqian and Minister Yan glanced at each other. Minister Yan cleared his throat and said directly, "There is a task that requires Mr. Luoan's participation. We previously identified places in Paris where nuclear materials may be hidden. One of them, the place is very dangerous, and it is also the most likely place to hide nuclear materials. It is in the underground fortifications of Paris. We are going to organize a team to enter the underground fortifications of Paris to conduct an investigation. The time is tomorrow. Is Mr. Luoan okay?" In this world of Paris, in order to cope with space invasion, the French government has spent hundreds of years building many underground shelters and underground fortifications in addition to the Paris subway system. These underground shelters are connected to the underground fortifications. Together, they form a huge underground city system. 2 years ago, due to the space invasion, part of Paris's underground city system was basically paralyzed. Many places were still occupied by monsters, and some were destroyed by military blasts. If some nuclear fuel was hidden in this underground system, that's the most convenient thing. For ordinary summoners, this task is absolutely arduous, going deep into dangerous places, but for Xiaopingan, it doesn't matter. No matter how dangerous it is, it can't be more dangerous than him being chased by a demigod. No problem. I can participate in this mission tomorrow. Let me ask, how many people will participate in this mission? Xiaopingan asked. In addition to an action team from our order committee, a team from the Chinese Dragon Group will also participate. This is a joint operation. Later, other members of the order committee's action team will come here to get to know you. People from the Dragon Group, you can see it tomorrow. Good. Lingqian, call someone here and get to know Mr. Luoan. A few minutes later, Xiaopingan saw Fang Lingshan, Tupolu, and Li Yunzhou in the conference room. In addition to these 3 people, there were 2 other people who were also summoners stationed in Paris by the order committee. They could also be regarded as Fang Lingshan. Lingqian's subordinates and colleagues are called Zhao Kui and Shi Manman. Zhao Kui looks like an introverted man who doesn't like to talk at first glance, while Shi Manman looks gentle and pure, but they are extremely capable and decisive people, both of whom are already in the dual realm. We haven't seen each other for more than 2 years. Li Yunzhou's cultivation level has reached the dual realm. Tu Polu and Fang Lingshan's cultivation levels have reached the 3 UN realm. Tu Polu is the strongest and his cultivation level has reached the mid to late 3 UN realm. Space Invasion Zone. A large number of boundary beads, constant fighting, and the large amount of boundary beads in stock released by the Order Committee under the crisis have allowed Tu Polu and others to greatly improve their strength in the past 2 years. For the summoners on Earth, the crises and battles brought about by space invasion are the catalyst for everyone's strength. Xiaopingan almost wanted to laugh when he saw that this guy Li Yunzhou actually had a beard and a neat suit, pretending to be a gentleman, pretending to be reserved and greeting him. Compare. In the world of summoners, strength is the brightest brand. Xiaopingan's cultivation in the 7th UN realm revealed by Xiaopingan. Even Tu Polu gave Xiaopingan enough respect when he saw Xiaopingan and took the initiative to salute. Say hello. Fang Lingshan is still beautiful, cold, and arrogant, and has changed little from when she first met Xiaopingan. After the greeting and acquaintance, Fang Lingshan raised her delicate eyebrows and asked bluntly, "I wonder where Mr. Luoan has seen me before." Upon hearing this question, several people in the room looked over. "I have a friend who knew you before, and that friend told me about you," Xiaopingan said. Fang Lingshan was slightly startled. "Mr. Luoan's friend knows me? What is the name of Mr. Luoan's friend?" "I'm sorry, this matter is difficult to explain. I can't say his name. If I want to say his name, you may all know him." Xiaopingan shook his head. "Do we all know each other?" Fang Lingshan was even more curious, but she could also see that the Luoan in front of her was probably not joking with her anymore. If he was joking, Luoan would just make up a name and a reason and deal with it. "The action time is tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Let's gather here." After getting to know everyone, Xiaopingan said goodbye and left. Under the attention of everyone, Xiaopingan walked out of this square building, and his figure gradually blurred as he walked on the street until he disappeared. It is a very powerful illusion and invisibility secret method. It is used very skillfully without a trace of fireworks. Generally speaking, summoners who master the illusion secret method can rarely use illusion to this extent. Minister Yan squinted his eyes slightly and looked at it. Xiaopingan disappeared in the direction, gently rubbing his chin. "Minister, I don't know why, but I feel that this Luoan is not hostile to us at all, and he seems to be very trustworthy." Tu Polu looked at the direction in which Xiaopingan disappeared, touched his head, and muttered, "It's really damn it, I actually believed in a strange summoner I just met for the first time. I was a little unconvinced before and wanted to compete with him, but why did I feel it was unnecessary after meeting? It's strange. I also feel that this Luoan seems to be indescribably familiar. He has no ill intentions towards us," Fang Lingshan also said doubtfully. Have we fallen into someone else's secret trick to confuse our minds?" Li Yunzhou had a wise and deep expression on his face, stroking his beard, but he said in a funny way as soon as he opened his mouth, "There has been no fluctuation of divine power in Luoan's body just now. He has not used any secret techniques." Fang Lingyu shook his head. "Actually, I also feel a little strange. When I first met him, I felt that this person didn't care about us at all. Malice. Perhaps this is the energy field and aura. A summoner's energy field and aura can better express what is in a summoner's heart than the words he speaks. Those summoners with a gloomy and cold aura that make people feel uncomfortable, the thoughts in my heart will never be sunny. When encountering such a summoner, everyone should be more careful. Although the origin of this Luoan is somewhat mysterious, judging from the aura of his contact with us, he should be able to win over us." Minister Yan made the final decision. He said, then looked around, "Everyone, go to bed early tonight and prepare for tomorrow's action. After leaving District 11, Xiaoping's figure soon appeared outside the Chez Terroir restaurant. In the night, the Chez Terroir restaurant is still open. The neon lights outside the restaurant are still on. The tempting aroma of French dishes is floating in the darkness. The homeless people on the street can only take a few sips from a distance. Get closer, and under the intimidating gaze of the security guard at the restaurant entrance, you obediently stay away. Seeing Xiaoping suddenly appear from the darkness and calmly walk to the door of the restaurant, the security guard at the door of the restaurant immediately recognized Xiaoping. His face changed instantly, and he immediately used the walkie-talkie to notify the inside of the restaurant. If they didn't know what this Luoan represented before, then they now know that this is a powerful summoner who can easily destroy the Doomsday Gang and the Jackal Gang with one person. The battle that night in the place de population in the 11th arrondissement has become a legend in Paris these days, causing a sensation throughout Paris. Mr. Luoan, welcome. Gabriel, the restaurant manager in a black evening gown, ran out of the restaurant as fast as he could, almost out of breath. Gabriel ran to the door of the restaurant and faced Xiaoping, bowed deeply, opened the door of the restaurant in person, and welcomed Xiaoping into the restaurant. Gabriel personally brought Xiaoping to the Golden Hall of the restaurant. This is the most advanced and luxurious private room in the restaurant. It is on the second floor of the restaurant and is not usually open to external guests. Gabriel asked someone to fetch Romani Conti's wine, and like a waiter, he stood at Xiaoping, opening wine bottles for Xiaoping, decanting the wine, and placing plates, knives, and forks, rigorously, thoughtfully, and meticulously. Caviar, foie gras, truffles, the best things in the restaurant, are served one after another. Xiaoping cut the foie gras and said to Gabriel while eating, "There is a very important matter that may be related to the survival of millions of people in Paris. I want to talk to you who can be responsible." "Mr. Luoan, please wait a moment." Gabriel bowed slightly and exited the restaurant. A minute later, he opened the door and walked in. He continued to serve Xiaoping and poured a glass of wine for Xiaoping. "We from the People's Front chairman Mr. Curie is on his way and will be here soon." If an ordinary summoner were to talk to him about issues related to the survival of millions of people in Paris, Gabriel would definitely sneer at him and tell him to get lost, but the man in front of him said that he would never dare to take it lightly, and he would not think that the other party would have the heart to make such a joke with him. "Well, the French food in your restaurant is indeed good. Your praise is our honor." Gabriel bowed slightly. Half an hour later, a black bulletproof Citroën car, escorted by several subs, drove quickly and stopped outside the restaurant. Heavily armed bodyguards were surrounding the area. One bodyguard opened the door of the bulletproof Citroën, and a black cane stretched out from the door. Then a bodyguard wearing a smart white striped suit, wearing a black cane and a beard. The silver-white but very delicately manicured old man got out of the car, entered the restaurant, and went directly to the place where Xiaoping was dining. At this time, Xiaoping had just finished a big meal and met the chairman of the People's Front in this room. "Mr. Luoan, I am very happy to see you here. Thank you for everything you have done for Paris." Mr. Curie looked like an old-school French gentleman. When he saw Xiaoping, he was very polite and could speak fluently and naturally Chinese. As soon as the two shook hands, Xiaoping smiled. This old man was actually a summoner of the Four Suns realm, and he had hidden himself deeply enough. Think about it, if this old man has no ability, how can he be the head of such a large organization? Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 522. Mr. Curie, I want to see you this time because there is something very important. I think you should know about this matter. As citizens living in the city of Paris and the masters of this country, you have the right to know that what kind of dangerous situation are you facing now, especially the situation that may directly affect the life safety of you and your friends. Xiaoping said with a serious face. Thank you very much Mr. Lugoan for your understanding of our position. I grew up in this city. I love this city. This city is all my memories. I love it more than myself. If Mr. Lugoan, if you know anyone who wants to threaten this city and the people living in the city, please let me know. Old man Curie sat upright, holding his cane with both hands, and said very solemnly. Okay, let me make a long story short. Mr. Curie should know about the Devil's Eye, right? Yes, I know, old man Curie nodded. Sasha from the Doomsday Gang is the one from Devil's Eye. What? Old man Curie's face suddenly became solemn. This was the first time they knew about this news. During this period, Sasha seemed to have disappeared. There were various rumors, and some said Sasha has escaped, some say that Sasha has gone into hiding and is preparing to make a comeback, and some say that Sasha was killed by Lugoan, but in fact, none of these rumors are accurate when Lugoan killed Sasha. The situation is that the only ones who really know Sasha's identity are Xiaoping'an and the Order Committee. How did Mr. Lugoan know Sasha's identity? It's simple, because I burned him to ashes, and Sasha is already the complete form of the brain-eating worm. Gabrielle was also in the restaurant room. When she heard Xiaoping'an said that Sasha was the complete form of the brain-eating worm, Gabrielle seemed to think of something and her face changed. She turned pale and looked faintly scared. Gabrielle was just an ordinary person. Instinctively fearing these monsters from another world, he drew a cross on his chest. Oh my God, I have met that bastard several times before and had dinner with him twice. Just tell me why that bastard likes eating beef brain so much. Haha, you're lucky that you didn't become his snack. Xiaoping'an smiled. Is the dangerous situation Mr. Lugoan mentioned related to the evil eye? Yes, Xiaoping'an nodded, I have definite news here. The Devil's Eye previously transported a batch of weapons-grade plutonium raw materials to Paris through Sasha. The quantity is conservatively estimated to be at least 60 to 90 kilograms, and there may be more. If used to make nuclear bombs, 4 to 6 nuclear bombs can be made. Even if there is no rush to make nuclear weapons, once those nuclear materials spread in Paris, Mr. Curie should know what the consequences will be. When Curie heard what Xiaoping'an said, he stood up in shock. Gabrielle was also stunned and swallowed, at least 4 to 6 nuclear bombs, in Paris. Xiaoping'an nodded. Is what Mr. Lugoan said true? Old man Curie's hand holding the cane trembled slightly, and his face turned pale. As a person with no shortcomings in IQ, old man Curie understands this matter better than anyone else. What would be the most serious consequences? Absolutely true. Why is Mr. Lugoan telling us this? Because this city belongs to you, to the millions of Parisians living in the city, and you are the real parties involved. I don't want to see you in great danger without knowing it, living in a muddle, and dying in a state of confusion. I don't know, but you know, I can actually keep this matter a secret from you. Even if there is any danger, I can always stay out of it and leave Paris. It's the same for me in another city. Xiaoping'an's face became more serious than ever before. The reason why I want to see Mr. Curie is because I want to ask Mr. Curie to tell the leaders of other organizations and gangs in Paris, and tell those who are capable, if they don't want to turn into the dust of a nuclear explosion in their sleep one night or watch this originally beautiful city eventually become a ghost town. So, please mobilize your manpower and use your power to hide the secrets in Paris. Find those dangerous nuclear materials. Xiaoping'an felt that the Order Committee and the Dragon Group's previous search for nuclear materials in Paris was actually a misunderstanding of intelligence work, or that they did not have such conditions or capabilities before, so they made slow progress. In Paris at the moment, the people who most want to find out those nuclear materials are actually none other than the gangsters in Paris, the ordinary people and vested interests in Paris, because those nuclear materials pose the most direct and immediate threat to them. If these people can be mobilized to fight a people's war in search of nuclear materials, the chance of winning is far greater than if the order committee relies on their intelligence system and a few summoners. Even if they can't be found, it would actually be good to let capable people escape from the city. At least it can save humanity a little less when a disaster actually occurs. The order committee may have thought that this kind of thing was confidential information related to the Devil's Eye, and if it was revealed, it would cause a big mess, so it was not announced. However, Xiaopingyan felt that it didn't matter. The Devil's Eye, the order committee, and the Dragon Group all knew about it. Let the people of Paris know that it is not a big deal. Paris is like this before our eyes. How can it be chaotic? In addition to the Doomsday Gang and Sasha regarding these nuclear materials, I wonder if Mr. Lugoan has any other information. There was also an Eastern European arms dealer named Olamov who was involved in this matter. That man was killed in Paris before. Sasha had a right-hand man named Alban, who may be related to those nuclear materials. That person is also missing now. The nuclear materials in the hands of Devil's Eye must still be somewhere in Paris and have not been transported out. That's all I know now. Nuclear raw materials have a very special property. This kind of thing will turn monsters into monsters because of its powerful radiation energy. At the same time, this thing cannot be stored in the summoner's space equipment and secret mandala, because once they are placed in space equipment or warehouses, no matter how tightly they are sealed, their radiation will directly affect the summoner. The so-called sealed package is equivalent to 0. For a summoner to store nuclear materials in his own space equipment and secrets, it is equivalent to exposing himself to strong nuclear radiation at any time, which is basically equivalent to committing suicide. In this case, the nuclear materials transported to Paris by the Devil's Eye can only be transported by ordinary means, and they can only exist somewhere in Paris, and cannot be hidden in a summoner's secret altar inside the city. Mr. Rohn, this matter involves the survival of millions of people in Paris. The information you provide us is very important. You are our forever friend. I know what to do. If we have any information, how can we contact you? Can you please contact Mr. Lugoan? Old Man Curie asked. Tie a bunch of blue balloons to the highest point of the tower, and I will come to the restaurant. If you have any troubles that you can't solve, I can solve them. Okay, I understand. Thank you again Mr. Lugoan for providing us with such important news today and giving us a chance to save ourselves. Old Man Curie shook hands with Xiaopingyan and bowed slightly. I'm going to see you now. The leaders of several gangs, please discuss and coordinate the next actions with them. Please forgive me. Mr. Curie, please. Old Man Curie simply left the restaurant, sat in his car, and quickly disappeared into the night under the protection of a group of bodyguards and guards. Xiaopingyan was full and then left. After walking out of the restaurant, in the sight of Gabrielle and several restaurant security guards, Xiaopingyan's figure, more than 10 meters out of the restaurant, looked like a punctured like bubbles. They slowly melted into the night, silently. These summoners are all monsters. Gabrielle stood at the door of the restaurant and underestimated. It was not until this time that the night wind blew, and Gabrielle felt that from the moment he heard the news of nuclear materials to the now, it soaked with sweat. Gabrielle thought that she also had a mistress in Paris, and that the mistress was already pregnant with his child, who would give birth in 2 months. Gabrielle couldn't sit still, and she was already thinking about how to make her child. The mistress needs to leave Paris first. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 523. Teacher, you are back. It was not too late and Emily had not gone to bed yet. As soon as Xiaopingyan returned to the villa, Emily greeted him. Those bastards were all taken away by the patrol team. The patrol team felt incredible. After showing off her skills today, Emily was still in the excitement. She didn't expect that the 4 targets that she usually seemed impossible to deal with bare hands would be dealt with so easily by her tonight. This made Emily Lee's confidence suddenly increased. Well, the gap between ordinary people and summoners will become wider and wider. When you fuse with the world bead in the future, the world bead will transform your body and make you stronger. It will be easy for you to defeat the heavyweight boxing champion with one punch. Teacher, when can I fuse the world pearl? After I took the pills you gave me, I feel like my current strength should be enough, right? Emily asked. You continue to take those pills, and it will be almost done in another week. Emily nodded, her eyes shining. Teacher, was that black dog summoned by you just now? If I become a summoner, can I summon a dog like that and let it be like Batu and stay with me forever? If you want to summon a dog, you need a suitable world bead. It is only possible after fusion. Moreover, your summoned object has a time limit for the arrival of the plane. You will know later. Okay, it is getting late tonight. We have to retreat tonight, so you should go to bed early. Well, okay, good night, teacher, I'll have a rest after finishing my evening classes. Emily was very satisfied and looking forward to her future. After sending Emily away, Xiaopinggan returned to his room, took out the tortoise-shell 5 elements reversed bag with sword formation plate to protect the room, and then entered his secret mandala and passed through the spiritual world of the secret mandala. The temple has entered the spiritual world. In Paris at night, the corresponding spiritual world is dotted with stars, and the sky is filled with the starry bodies of sleeping people, while the ground in the spiritual world is still desolate and filled with mist. Ordinary people make up the majority on the earth, so most of the star spirits in the sky are flashing with white light. The light of the star spirits of summoners and warriors is different from the light of ordinary star spirits. Summoners under the One Sun realm star spirits are all light yellow, and there are very few of them in Paris. There are only a few of them, and you can almost see them at a glance. And because the summoner in this world does not have a divine spring, the realm of the summoner cannot break through the Yang realm to a certain extent, so the star spirit body of the summoner in this world, even if it is above the 3UN realm, the light of the star spirit body it will only gradually change from light yellow to bright yellow, to deep yellow, to golden yellow, but the color is deepening, and there will not be star spirits of various colors like those summoners in the Yuan Kai world. As for warriors, the same is true. The light of the starry spirit bodies of warriors in this world also starts from light red and becomes darker all the way. Warriors on the earth are even rarer, and due to the lack of cultivation resources and techniques, they are also unable to practice to a higher level. On a high level, to a certain extent, this planet is a barren land for cultivation. The light of more than 20 star spirits flickered and dimmed slightly. Xiaopinggan took a look and saw that those star spirits were being absorbed and entangled by the nightmare insects. Xiaopinggan made a magic trick, stretched out his hand, and more than 20 stars in the sky that were possessed by nightmare insects fell from the sky at the same time. It was only then that those nightmare insects seemed to realize that there were other creatures on the ground. Suddenly they stared with blood-red eyes, opened their big mouths, and rushed towards Xiaopinggan. Looking at the nightmare insects that were rushing towards them with their teeth and claws, Xiaopingyan smiled coldly. He hadn't killed the nightmare insects for a long time. I had time today, so I just killed a few to replenish myself and add a little soul power to myself. Practice is to add up a little and make a lot. Grasshoppers are also meat. Xiaopingyan pinched the silver necklace of the Flame King Kong around his neck. There was just a flash of light. In the next second, Xiaopinggan's whole body turned into the terrifying Flame King Kong. A metal giant appeared in the spiritual world in an instant. In the wilderness, those nightmare insects that had rushed towards them with their claws and fangs bared were as weak and ridiculous as loaches and earthworms in front of a powerful fortress guarding artifact like the terrifying Flame King Kong. The Flame King grabbed it, and the 5 nightmare insects were directly crushed by the Flame King. He stepped out and trampled 3 more to death. A little golden light flew up from the body of the nightmare insect, and suddenly fell into the center of Xiaopinggan's eyebrows. Middle. The remaining nightmare insects were frightened and wanted to flee in all directions, but how could those poor nightmare insects escape from the Flame King Kong? As soon as the Flame King stretched out his hand, a flame flew out from his finger, like a fire whip, passing through the air at 360 degrees and sweeping in a circle. The scattered nightmare insects turned into ashes in the blink of an eye and fell from the air. A nightmare insect ran away, and the soul power of their bodies, like a trickle flowing into the sea, was all absorbed by Xiaopinggan. The next second, the light flashed, and the huge metal body of the Flame King disappeared. Xiaopinggan appeared on the ground, with the necklace of the Fire King still hanging around his neck. He waved his hand, and the bodies of the stars that had escaped the possession of the nightmare insect were released. Returning to the sky and entering sweet dreams, for the owners of the star spirit bodies, they have no idea what happened after they were freed from the nightmare. After killing these nightmare insects, Xiaopinggan found that his soul power had increased by more than 30 cuts. The soul power he had just harvested had exceeded the combined soul power of several ordinary summoners. Remember that he had just entered the soul power. When he entered the world, his total soul power was only a few kills. It seems that Mu Lao said that in the spiritual world, it was not that easy for the shepherds to harvest the soul power of the nightmare insects. The key is that there are a lot of shepherds, so the nightmare insects should be the shepherds. The prey of spiritual beings, shepherds travel around the spiritual world, guarding the star spirits in the sky, and killing nightmare insects and monsters to practice cultivation. However, in the spiritual world now, there is only one shepherd like himself, but the prey is so much, that's why I feel it's easy to increase soul power. Xiaopinggan touched his chin and muttered to himself. Anyway, this is a good thing. If soul power is also a cultivation resource, then the entire spiritual world's cultivation resources now belong to him, which is ridiculously sufficient. Killing the nightmare insect is incidental. Xiaopinggan's entry into the spirit world this time was not mainly to kill the nightmare insect monster. There were several light yellow and bright yellow stars flashing in the sky. Those stars were gathered together and very close to each other. They were not far from Xiaopinggan. Xiaopinggan quickly locked the target. Fang Lingshan, Fang Lingqian, Tupolu, and Li Yunzhou were already asleep at this moment. Perhaps because they have to carry out a mission tomorrow, everyone has rested tonight to recharge their batteries. After the summoner falls asleep, sometimes he will dream, and sometimes he will not dream. When he is dreaming, the summoner's star spirit body is in his own dream state. When he is not dreaming, the star spirit body is in a kind of dream state. In a peaceful dreamless sleep. Of course, for the shepherd's dream enlightenment technique, it is too easy to enter other people's dreams. It is just like a top hacker invading the computer of an ordinary computer user. No matter whether the other party is dreaming or not, he can enter, even if he is not there. Anything in the dream can pull them into their own dreams. Xiaopinggan directly entered Fang Lingshan's dream. Fang Lingshan was not dreaming, but she suddenly fell asleep and found herself back at the base of the order committee of Xianghe City. In Mo Yanxiao's office, he saw Xiaopinggan. Ah, Xiaopinggan, why are you back? Have you completed your mission? Lingshan, my mission is not completed yet. Our mission is more dangerous than imagined. I won't be able to come back in a short time. Xiaopinggan smiled at Fang Lingshan. Remember what I said to you now, you still in your dream, I can only meet you in your dream for the time being. I told Luoan your name. He is also my friend. You can trust him like you trust me. If you don't know how to fuse the world pearl, or if you have any difficulties, you can go to him and he will find a way to help you fuse the world pearl. I'm glad to see you again in my dream. Remember what I said to you in my dream. Keep it secret. I know you think you are dreaming, but it doesn't matter. For tomorrow's mission, I told Luoan to summon 5 elite slaves, 1 firefly and a dog to clear the way. This is a secret signal. You can confirm me when you see it. Now that's what I'm talking about. After giving Fang Lingshan a dream and saying a few words, Xiaopinggan suddenly retreated from Fang Lingshan's dream. In a room at the Order Committee stronghold in District 11, Fang Lingshan, who was already asleep on the bed, suddenly opened her eyes. Fang Lingshan herself was a little confused. When she opened her eyes, Fang Lingshan was a little confused, puzzled, and a little shocked. Am I thinking too much? Is this a dream? After leaving Fang Lingshan's dream, Xiaopinggan once again entered Tupolu's dream. Tupolu, like Fang Lingshan, also had a dreamless sleep. Then Xiaopinggan was brought into the office of the Order Committee of Xianghe City and talked about. Fang Lingshan heard similar words. Later, Xiaopinggan entered Li Yunzhou's dream. This guy Li Yunzhou is really dreaming, having a sweet dream. On the beach, watching a group of beauties in bikinis running back and forth in front of him, Li Yunzhou was chasing those beauties, dripping with laughter, so happy and extremely vulgar. But suddenly, all the beauties running on the beach disappeared and turned into disgusting zombies. Li Yunzhou was startled and wanted to run, but found that his feet were stuck in the beach, completely there was no turbulence, and in the end only half of the body was exposed on the beach. Then, a group of zombies covered in pus and sticking out long moldy tongues crowded over, leaving disgusting saliva, wanting to line up to kiss Li Yunzhou, watching the ferocious faces getting closer and closer. Ah! Li Yunzhou yelled and suddenly turned over from the bed and sat up. He was panting, sweating profusely, and was so frightened that his face turned pale with fear. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 524. The palace is such a forbidden area. Where did this rabbit come from? In the palace of the Northern Wei dynasty, Tuoba Si stood in front of the steps of the main hall, holding a riding whip in his hand. He was shocked and angry, glaring at the guards in the palace, and shouted questions. While Tuoba Si shouted and asked, he whipped the standing guard hard with the riding whip. The palace guards in front of him. As a Xianbei person, Tuoba Si has fair skin, slender eyes, and a beard just now. He looks like he is less than 20 years old, that is, a young man. The guards in the palace were also panicked. They didn't dare to say a word or defend themselves under the emperor's whip. They looked at each other and had no idea where the rabbit came from. Tuoba Si has ordered a thorough investigation of the guards in the palace tonight and everyone entering and leaving the palace. They must find out where the rabbit came from. The atmosphere in the entire Northern Wei Palace suddenly became tense. Come on, the reason for all this is because of the rabbit that suddenly appeared in front of Tuoba Si in the palace tonight. There are no rabbits in the palace, and there are no dog holes in the palace. According to the rules of the Northern Wei dynasty, these animals are not allowed to be brought into the palace. Rabbits are very common in other places and are not a big deal. However, if this kind of thing appears in the Northern Wei Palace tonight and is seen by the emperor, it is a big deal. This means that the guards in the palace are safe and exist. Major omissions. Today, a rabbit can jump through the many guards and jump in front of Tuoba Si. If there is an assassin in the future, will it be able to appear in front of Tuoba Si like this? Moreover, Tuoba Si had just succeeded the emperor of the Northern Wei dynasty not long ago and was very suspicious. This is why Tuoba Si was furious because of the rabbit. There was no calm in the palace all night. Tuoba Si had no intention of sleeping. Countless people in the palace were on tenterhooks all night. After a noisy night, they checked everyone in the palace and all the guards, and found that none of them knew what happened. Where did the rabbit come from? Faced with such a result, even if Tuoba Si was the emperor, he was dumbfounded. He was breathing heavily in the study, his eyes flashing gloomily, not knowing what he was thinking. The people around Xuanhuan were also a little scared, fearing that today's incident would turn into a murderous case caused by a rabbit if they continued to investigate. Several people exchanged glances, and an old eunuch beside Xuanhuan stepped forward cautiously and said, "Your Majesty, the origin of that rabbit is mysterious, as if it suddenly appeared in the palace. It may be some kind of omen. Why don't your Majesty call Xuanhuan and ask if there is anything about this rabbit that suddenly appeared in the palace? What's the omen, is it good or bad?" The old eunuch's words reminded Xuanhuan, and Xuanhuan patted his forehead. How could he forget Xuanhuan about such a big event? Xuanhuan is proficient in yin and yang magic and the Book of Changes, so he must know the meaning of the rabbit entering the palace. Immediately announce Xuanhuan to come to the palace to see you. More than an hour later, Xuanhuan, who had just opened his eyes and saw his frail little body, who was practicing Ba Duan Jin at home and starting to condition his body, was hurriedly taken to the palace of the Northern Wei dynasty by the old eunuch. Arriving at Xuanhuan's study. Before that, after wandering around the spirit world, Xuanhuan returned to his room and began to fuse Xuanhuan's world bead. Xuanhuan is indeed, as the history books said, a young man who is good at literature, well read in classics and history, involved in the mysteries of yin and yang, and hundreds of schools of thought, and studies the meaning of classics intensively. However, Xuanhuan's body seems to lack exercise. In Xuanhuan, his eyes are too handsome and his looks are a little weak. If he encounters an accident or something, self-protection will be a problem. Xuanhuan has met His Majesty. Xuanhuan bowed to Xuanhuan, and at the same time secretly looked at Xuanhuan. At this moment, Xuanhuan should have just been on the throne for about a year. In the 148th year of the Northern Wei dynasty, Guozhou had 14 emperors, among whom there were actually 11 emperors. The lifespan of these foreigners in the Chinese dynasties was generally short. The same was true for the Northern Wei dynasty established by the Xianbei people. One of the most bizarre rules of the Northern Wei dynasty was that whoever wanted to be the emperor had to chop off his mother first. This is called litsi killing. Mother is like an animal. When Xuanhuan was established as the crown prince, his mother was killed. Because Xuanhuan was too sad, he was reprimanded and demoted from the palace by Xuanbei. As a result, Xuanbei was also involved in the coup. Having been beheaded by his other son, the court of the Northern Wei dynasty was a replica of the animal world, and it was the bloodiest and most inhumane kind. Xuanhuan estimated that none of the emperors of the Northern Wei dynasty had a normal heart. They stepped on their mother's bones one by one to ascend to the throne. It was not allowed by nature. These emperors of the Northern Wei dynasty had to be normal in their hearts. The Xuanhuan in front of him looks still young. But he only has a few more years to live, and he will burp at the age of 32. Xuanhuan sacrifices wine without ceremony. Yesterday, I actually saw a rabbit running into the palace. I would like Dr. Xuanhuan to explain to me. Is this a good or bad omen? Xuanhuan looked at Xia with expectant eyes. Pingan, because Xuanhuan was proficient in Yang Ili, Xuanhuan appointed Xuanhuan as a doctor to offer wine sacrifices, and often asked Xuanhuan to give him divination. Excuse me, Your Majesty, when and where did you see the rabbit, and what color was the rabbit? Xuanhuan asked seriously. Xuanhuan answered. Xuanhuan then started to make calculations with his fingers in front of Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan didn't have the skills to calculate, but he remembered the result of Xuanhuan's divination for Xuanhuan. The world bead turned into a black box world bead for HA, and no one could fuse it. Those who fused the world bead faced each other in the world bead. This kind of scene, if you can say it right, then there will be ghosts. After a while, Xuanhuan stopped the deduction, with a smile on his face. Congratulations to Your Majesty, congratulations to Your Majesty. According to the calculations of the ministers, the rabbit entered the palace to be seen by Your Majesty. This is a good omen, Your Majesty does not need to worry. Hearing what Xiaoping'an said, Tuabasai's anxious heart suddenly dropped halfway to his stomach, but he still asked, "What does this auspicious omen mean?" "The rabbit entering the palace indicates that your majesty will have a happy event next year. The monarch of our neighboring country will send his princess to marry your majesty." Tuabasai was still 20 years old at the moment. He was confused when he heard that the neighboring country would send him a princess next year. Is this such a good thing? Which country is probably sending the princess to offer wine? Your majesty saw the rabbit in the child's hour. The child's hour is the hexagram kun, which corresponds to the Qin kingdom in the southwest. Ah, you mean Yao Xing will marry his daughter to a widower next year? Tuabasai looked unbelievable, because the relationship between Wei and Qin was not very good at the moment. The two countries bordered each other, and there were constant fights and wars on the border. The letter came. Your Majesty, please wait and see. Yao Xing is already old. He is no longer the same as before. Being at odds with the Wei state may not be a blessing to the Qin state, Xiaoping'an said confidently, because he knew that next year, Yao Xing would really put the daughter was sent to Tuabasai for marriage, and the woman sent was both Queen Yao and Queen Zaoi of the northern Wei dynasty. Hearing what Xiaoping'an said, Tuabasai was completely relieved. The frown on his face suddenly relaxed and he laughed. If everything goes as Kuijiju said next year, I will definitely be rewarded. This is all a great blessing to His Majesty, and the humble minister is just doing his part. The risk of a murder caused by a rabbit was eliminated. Xiaoping'an left the northern Wei palace under the grateful eyes of the eunuchs beside Tuabasai and a bunch of palace guards. Master Kui, you have worked hard this time. Everyone in the palace is grateful to Master Kui. Your Majesty acted like that last night. It was so scary. Before leaving, the old eunuch who sent Xiaoping'an out also took a long breath and said to Xiaoping'an, "Peace is truly appreciated. Your Majesty has great blessings, but sometimes he is too cautious. Eunuch Qian, please stay." "Okay, Master Kui, let's go slowly." The old eunuch nodded, turned, and left with a smile. Seeing that the world of the world pearl has not been shattered at this time, Xiaoping'an, who left the palace, could only touch his nose. It seems that this is just the first level. The test of this world pearl is not over yet. "Master, please get in the car." The Kui mansion's coachman and two guards had already led the carriage over. After returning home in a carriage, Xiaoping'an sat in the study for a while. He saw that the bookshelves in the study were filled with various ancient books. He picked up a book of Shangshu and just opened a few pages. I saw that the book was filled with fine and neat little characters, all of which were Kui Hao's annotations on Shangshu. The language was exquisite and the insights were unique. The same goes for opening the book poetry next to it. There are Kui Hao's annotations in the book. Looking at the books on the bookshelf, Xiaoping'an flipped through them. Suddenly he remembered something, and his expression suddenly changed. A few minutes later, thick smoke billowed out of Kui Hao's study. Xiaoping'an stood in the study and threw all the books that Kui Hao had annotated into the brazier one by one. After seeing the fire burning, Xiaoping'an simply pushed the entire bookshelf into the flames, and then walked out of the study calmly. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 525. When the servants of the Kui mansion saw thick smoke coming out of Kui Hao's yard, they thought there was a fire and rushed to rescue them. A group of servants rushed into the yard, only to see Kui Hao standing calmly outside the study with his hands behind his back, looking at the fire in the study. He gave a faint instruction: "The flames in the study are too big. There is no need to snatch out the books inside. Just don't let the fire in the study spread to other places." Keeping those annotated books in the study would be a disaster for the Kui family. Because Kui Hao was so talented, the books he annotated had a huge influence among scholars, and everyone who read them regarded them as treasures. Later, Some people even proposed that the books Kui Hao annotated be published throughout the Northern Wei dynasty to replace other books. His works allow all readers to learn these books commented by Kui Hao. Although the person who suggested publishing Kui Hao's annotated book as a standard textbook for scholars across the country is suspected of trying to beat Kui Hao's horse, this also illustrates Kui Hao's ability from the side. Of course, this was one of the reasons why the Kui family later fell. The emperor of the Northern Wei dynasty, in order to consolidate his throne and power, could disown all his relatives. How could he tolerate a Han Chinese having such a supreme status among the scholars of the Northern Wei dynasty? The real reason was that the Xianbei royal family could not tolerate a Han ethnic group with strong Han ethnic elements becoming powerful in the Northern Wei dynasty and threatening their rule. Others don't know the root cause of the Kui family's downfall, but Xiaopingyan knows it all too well. The Kui family's downfall and the literary inquisition caused by the national history case are just an excuse. This was originally a fatal trap set by the Northern Wei royal family for Kui Hao. He wanted to fix it. The royal family is responsible for the history of the country, and it is also the royal family who ordered Kui Hobing to write real records. After the history books were compiled, it was also the royal family who carved the history books into stone tablets and showed them to the Xianbei nobles in the capital. Finally, because the history books recorded the deeds of many Xianbei people's ancestors, the incident exposed the national evil and used history books to stir up the anger of the Xianbei aristocracy. It was also the royal family who used this excuse to exterminate Kui Hao's clan. Seeing the books in the room burn to ashes, Xiaopingyan finally breathed a sigh of relief. If a study is burned down, as long as no one is hurt, it's no big deal. The Kui family of King He is one of the 4 noble surnames in the Northern Wei dynasty. Kui Hao's 7th-generation ancestor Kui Lin came from the Cao Wei dynasty of the 3 kingdoms to worship Sikong. Kui Hao's great-grandfather, grandfather, and father were all high-ranking officials in the capital. His father was also awarded the title of White Horse. Sir, burning a study room in a home like this is just a trivial matter. By the afternoon, Kui Hao's study had been torn down. The Kui family hired craftsmen to build another study for Kui Hao. Just after lunch, Taishi ordered Wang Liang to visit. After hearing Wang Liang's intention, Xiaopingyan breathed a sigh of relief and secretly said that he had lit the fire at the right time. Master Wang, I'm sorry, there was a fire in my study today. All the books in the room have been burned. My decades of hard work are gone. The 10 wings I annotated is also burned. Xiaopingyan he shook his head and said with a bitter look on his face. Ah, how could there be a fire? Wang Liang also looked shocked and regretful. Maybe I was too hasty when I entered the palace in the morning. When I left the study, I accidentally took over the lampstand in the study and didn't find it. Alas, it was also a disaster. A few days ago, I divined that there might be a fire in my house recently. I didn't expect it. But he left it in his study. Last time, the imperial physician ordered Master Zhou Dan to say that he was lucky enough to come to his residence and read the 10 wings annotated by Master Kui. He was astonished and enlightened. He suddenly realized that there were many unknown principles in the Book of Changes. After he read the 10 wings annotated by Sir, he was immediately enlightened, and I wanted to shamelessly borrow it to study, but it's a pity, it's really a pity. I wonder when Sir Kui will annotate 10 wings again. I've been low on energy lately, and I'm feeling dizzy. I can only wait for my energy to slowly return to those books, and I can annotate as many as I can remember. In the next 3 or 4 months, Xiaopingyan complained to others about his illness, saying that his study was burned down in a fire, and all the classics he had annotated in the past were burned. He was sad and depressed. He basically stayed at home, guided his breath and exercised every day, and did research when he had free time. Take a look at the younger members of the Kui family and see if you can find any useful talents. There is no way. Kui Hao is good at everything, his intelligence is almost demonic, and he is also very handsome. He often compares himself to Zhang Liang, but his body is a bit weak. Even history books say that Cui Hao looks like a woman, with handsome appearance and good body. Not strong either. There is no record of Cui Hao's descendants in history books. Maybe it was because Cui Hao was weak and even childless. When Tuaba Si heard that Xiaopinggan's study had been burned down, he felt sad and depressed. He even asked the eunuch in the palace to send Xiaopinggan hundreds of new books and some medicine, and told Xiaopinggan to take care of his health. These books, in this day and age, are not cheap. Cultivating guidance requires at least 100 days to build the foundation. After 3 or 4 months of training, Cui Hao's body gradually improved with its qi channels opened up and the 5 internal organs harmonized. Xiaopinggan's daily energy became more and more vigorous, and finally he could no longer, no matter how weak he is, he can even shoot a bow. Among the Cui family members, Cui Hao also found several useful talents. After his health improved, he could do more things. Xiaopinggan began to inspect the Cui family's farm property. Cui Hao, the Cui family of King He, has Cui Lin as his ancestor. Since they are a wealthy family, it goes without saying that they are rich. There are more than 10 farms in the whole family, and they also run various businesses, making them extremely wealthy. After a round of inspections, Xiaopinggan began to plan. Since he is Cui Hao now, he must try his best to avoid the tragic fate of several families related to Cui Hao in the future. This era is too chaotic. The Sima family in the south is not a good bird, and there are many powerful families in the north. Changing the king's flag at any time, not to mention claiming kingship, but at least ensuring that Cui Hao's lineage can continue. After arriving in Jizhu for more than 4 months and making preparations, Xiaopinggan entered the courtyards of the Cui family's back house for the first time. Seeing Xiaopinggan Shi Shiren arriving with a box in his hand, the 2 maids at the door of the Cui family's back house were shocked. They seemed not to have expected Cui Hao to come here, because Cui Hao almost never came to the back house. Master, the relationship with the wife is not harmonious. Although they live in the same home, they basically avoid each other. Everyone in the Cui family knows that the master's study was burned down a few months ago. When the wife knew about it, she only sent her personal maid to come and visit. I found that the master was fine, so I stopped taking care of him. I've seen the master. The maid in the backyard hurriedly saluted Xiaopinggan. Is Madame back? Xiaopinggan asked knowingly. He knew that his wife had just returned from burning incense in the temple today, so he asked deliberately. Cui Hao's 2 wives were both daughters of Guo Yi, a wealthy family in Taiyuan, and were sisters. The eldest Mrs. Guo died a few years after marrying Cui Hao, and then the younger Mrs. Guo married over. This was a political marriage between the Cui family and the Guo family. They were united by interests, and there was not much affection in the first place. In addition, Cui Hao was proficient in yin and yang mathematics and advocated Taoism, while Mrs. Xiao Guo believed in Buddhism. The 2 had different beliefs. The dispute between Buddhism and Taoism became particularly fierce in this family. Cui Hao once burned the Buddhist scriptures read by Mrs. Xiao Guo into ashes and flushed them into the toilet. Mrs. Xiao Guo also came from a wealthy family, so she naturally didn't give Cui Hao a good look. Although the couple maintained a relationship with others, they had been in a cold war for a long time. Xiaopinggan murmured that another reason why Cui Hao had no heirs was recorded in history books. Maybe the relationship between Cui Hao and his wife was very tense. Madame has returned and is in the Cloud Hall. The maid said in a panic. There were many Xianbei nobles in the Northern Wei dynasty who believed in Buddhism. Cui Hao previously believed in Taoism and suppressed Buddhism. Invisibly, he also offended a lot of Xianbei nobles and was hated by many Xianbei nobles. This was also one of the reasons why the Cui family was destroyed in the future. The one who really wanted to suppress Buddhism was the Northern Wei royal family, because the prosperity of Buddhism in the Northern Wei dynasty also threatened the rule of the Northern Wei royal family. Xiaopingan walked towards the backyard, and of the two maids, one guided Xiaopingan and the other hurriedly went to report. Yuntang is the place where Mrs. Xiaoguo worships Buddha and chants sutras at home. Passing through the lotus pond in the cloister, Xiaopingan quickly arrived at the cloud hall. Standing outside the cloud hall, Xiaopingan saw a woman with a full head of hair, a gold hairpin, and a green dress. She was inside the house, chanting sutras facing the Buddha statue in the niche. The woman's back is extremely beautiful, graceful, and elegant, and she has the air of a lady. Outside the cloud hall, there was an older maid standing. She was the personal maid brought by Mrs. Xiaoguo from the Guo family. The maid was quite surprised when she saw Xiaopingan coming, and gave Xiaopingan a wary look. He quickly entered Yuntang to report. The woman who was chanting sutras heard the warning from the maid beside her, and turned around and glanced at Xiaopingan. With phoenix eyes, willow leaf eyebrows, a tall nose, an oval face, fair skin, and a graceful and intellectual temperament, she is indeed a beautiful woman. It's embarrassing to say that this is the first time Xiaopingan has seen what his wife looks like. Mrs. Xiaoguo was a little surprised when she saw Xiaopingan's arrival. She knew that Kuihao didn't like her chanting Buddhist scriptures at home. She was afraid that Xiaopingan would come again and damage her Buddhist hall, so she quickly asked her personal maid to remove the Buddhist niche. The curtain in front of me was closed, and my face, which had been calm just a moment ago, suddenly turned cold, and I was already ready to say something striking. Wait a minute. Xiaopingan stepped into the cloud hall and stopped the maid from pulling up the curtain of the Buddhist niche. He raised his head and looked at the gilt bronze Buddha statue in the Buddhist niche. Then, Mrs. Xiaoguo and the maid beside her were surprised. In his eyes, he came to the futon in front of the Buddhist niche, took 3 sticks of incense, lit it, and put it in the incense burner. Then he knelt in front of the Buddha statue, clasped his hands together, and said, "Please forgive me for your sins. I was ignorant before. I have come here to repent for destroying Buddhist scriptures. I am willing to publish thousands of Buddhist scriptures and circulate them widely to atone for my previous sins." After saying that, Xiaopingan bowed 3 times to the Buddha statue, and then stood up gently and said to Mrs. Xiaoguo, he said, "If Madam wants to worship Buddha and recite sutras in the future, you don't have to avoid me anymore. I support it." "Husband, what do you mean by this?" Although Mrs. Xiaoguo was shocked, she still asked calmly. She really didn't believe that her husband had changed his gender. Xiaopingan glanced at Mrs. Xiaoguo's personal maid, and gently waved her hand to let the maid leave. The maid glanced at Mrs. Xiaoguo, and Mrs. Xiaoguo nodded. The maid then walked out of the cloud hall and closed the door. "I've been a little busy these days. I haven't seen Madam for a long time. I want to have a good chat with Madam." "Madam, please sit down." Xiaopingan came to Mrs. Xiaoguo and sat down on the chair. Mrs. Xiaoguo also sat down, feeling in her heart after calming down for a moment. His face softened slightly, but he still looked at Xiaopingan with suspicious eyes. "Last time I burned my wife's Buddhist scriptures, opposed my wife's belief in Buddhism, and uttered evil words. It was my fault. My husband came to Yuntang today specifically to apologize to my wife." Xiaopingan stood up and faced Xiaoguo. The lady bowed slightly. Mrs. Xiaoguo also quickly stood up and returned the courtesy, and said politely, "I didn't know that my husband believed in Taoism before. I often read sutras at home, and I often did it inappropriately. Please don't blame me." Listening to Mrs. Xiaoguo's words full of diplomatic politeness, Xiaopingan could only smile bitterly. "Maybe Madam can't believe it for a moment, but I do sincerely apologize to Madam. I used to think that Buddhism and Taoism are opposites. There is Buddha and there is no Buddhism. Tao, there is Tao but no Buddha. In the past 2 days, I have understood clearly. Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism are originally one family. The red lotus, white lotus root and green lotus leaves have never been separated. They are just different names and realms. There is only one family between heaven and earth. Dharma, all dharmas are all Buddhist dharmas, and all dharmas are also Taoist dharmas. Buddhism seeks liberation, while Taoism seeks freedom. All dharmas are based on benevolence, so there is no difference. Laozi rides a green ox out of Hang Pass to the west, transforming who is just a preacher. The saints of the three religions came into the world at the same time. Now Buddhism has come from the east, and it just comes and goes. Hearing what Xiaopingan said and looking at Xiaopingan's apologetic and sincere eyes, Mrs. Xiaoguo was really surprised. It would have been impossible for Kui Hao to say these words before, even if he killed Kui Hao. Who dares to say a word about Buddhism? Kui Hao he was about to retaliate immediately. Because of this, Kui Hao not only became quarrelsome with himself, but also turned against his cousin Kui Yi and others. They were like fire and water. Xiaopingan's apology when he looked at Mrs. Xiaoguo was really not pretending, but coming from the bottom of his heart. Because of Kui Hao, Mrs. Xiaoguo was buried with him in the end, and even the entire Guo family was killed. Kui Haoruo couldn't change for his own destiny. The Taiyuan Guo family's marriage with such a son-in-law was tantamount to ruining the destiny of his entire family. Husband, why has my husband changed so much? Mrs. Xiaoguo asked curiously. Mrs. Hajiao learned that I haven't been out to relax recently. Just 2 days ago, I was out playing and wandered to the forest to rest alone. Suddenly I saw a monk from the western region sitting under a tree. The monk's appearance Gaogu, when he saw me, without saying anything, he suddenly started reciting a Buddhist sutra. Madam also knew my temper. I have always disliked Buddhist sutras. When I heard that monk reciting sutras, I turned around and wanted to leave. But after walking a few steps, I suddenly heard that the monk's Buddhist scriptures were very similar to the teachings of Confucius in the Analects of Confucius. They coincided with each other. I was very surprised at the time, and my mind went blank. I couldn't help but stay where I was, waiting for the monk from the western regions to finish memorizing the Buddhist scriptures. Mrs. Xiaoguo frowned slightly. She was familiar with many Buddhist scriptures translated from the Kingdom of Wei, and she didn't know which one Xiaopingan was talking about. What words made my husband think that the Buddhist scriptures and the sage Confucius said the same truth? Don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you. This saying comes from the Analects of Confucius. I often use the saying to educate my disciples. Madam should know. Yes, not bad. I didn't expect that Buddha actually said something almost exactly the same as sage Confucius. Xiaopingan looked shocked. Oh, really, what words are they? Good man, I say that bodhisattvas do not add anything to things that are not their own. If bodhisattvas guard this dharma, they will be able to uphold all the prohibitions of Buddhas and Tathagatas. Why? If you love your life, you should not kill, and if you value your wealth, you should not stealing, protecting your wife and house, and not intruding on others. Such actions are all called one dharma. Good man, if there is anyone who respects and obeys the words of the Tathagata, he should always remember this one dharma. Why? No sentient beings enjoy suffering. Everything you do seeks peace and happiness. Even if a bodhisattva seeks an uttara samyak sambodhi, it is for the sake of happiness for yourself and others. Good man, with this meaning, I say this, don't add to things that are not your own such a dharma, these bodhisattvas should always protect it. Xiaopingan directly recited a Buddhist scripture and said with emotion, Madam, listen, the Buddha's teaching to the bodhisattvas is don't add to things that are not your own. Isn't it the same as giving to others? When I heard this sentence in the forest that day, I felt my mind was shaken. It seemed that I suddenly understood and found that I had many misunderstandings about Buddhism before. Don't add to things that don't belong to you, don't add to things that don't belong to you. Mrs. Xiaoguo was shocked. It is indeed as your husband said, this Buddha's teachings are truly the same as those of Confucius. It's completely consistent with not doing to others what you don't want to do to others. Madam, it's not just that. Xiaoping'an also became energetic and started to speak immediately. There are also scriptures in the Buddhist scriptures that say this: good man, as you asked, what is the Dharma, Tathagata, are you aware now? Good man, there are no small dharmas that the Tathagata has awakened. Why? The Tathagata has awakened because he has no awareness. Good man, the Tathagata has awakened that all dharmas have no birth, that all dharmas have no cessation, that the Tathagata has awakened, and that all dharmas are separated from two. The Tathagata has awakened. All dharmas are unreal. This is the Tathagata. Good man, the nature of all karma is the Tathagata. All dharmas arise from causes and conditions. This is the Tathagata. The law of causes and conditions is like lightning. This is the Tathagata. Enlightenment, good man, the one-phase Dharma is the Tathagata enlightenment. What is the same phase? It is said that all dharmas do not come or go, have neither cause nor condition, do not arise or die, have no taking or giving up, neither increase nor decrease. Good man, the inherent nature of all dharmas is nothing and cannot be explained. It is not something that can be explained by words and phrases. Such a dharma is what Tathagata came to realize. Xiaoping'an recited another scripture casually. Look, madam, isn't this scripture the same as what Lao Tzu said about the Tao being invisible? The Tao can be Tao, it can be named, it can be named, it can be named. It's the same truth. At that time, after I listened to that Tao from the western regions, after the monk memorized the scriptures, I suddenly had a profound enlightenment. I finally understood that Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism are originally one family. I also finally understood how narrow-minded I was in the past. I was too obsessed with the differences between sects and names, and did not have a thorough understanding of the three principles. I'm really ashamed of the true meaning behind the teaching. Ms. Xiaoguo frowned softly and murmured to herself twice, also surprised, husband, I have read many Buddhist scriptures translated by Wei Guo, but none of the scriptures in the Buddhist scriptures are what your husband just said. I don't know these scriptures. Which Buddhist scripture does the text come from? Xiaoping'an said, of course you don't know now that this Buddhist scripture was not translated until the Tang dynasty. I was greatly shocked at the time, and asked the monk from the western region what Buddhist sutra it was. The monk smiled and replied, this sutra has not yet been introduced to the Wei state. I am the first person in the Wei state who has the honor to hear the sutra. What is the meaning of the sutra? The name is called the Mahayana Liwen Universal Light Tibetan Sutra. As a devout Buddhist believer, Ms. Xiaoguo became anxious when she heard that this Buddhist sutra had not yet been introduced to the Wei state. She immediately asked, just listening to the few sentences that your husband just said, I felt that this sutra is extremely wonderful. I have never heard of it, and I wonder if my husband still remembers other parts of the Buddhist scriptures. Madam knows that I have always had a good memory. It is strange to say that after listening to the monk from the western regions reciting this Buddhist sutra, I memorized the entire Buddhist sutra in my head at once, and the monk from the western regions disappeared for some reason. I came to see Madam today and wanted to give the sutra to Madam and share it with Madam. Xiaoping'an said, opened the wooden box he brought, took out a thin and beautifully bound book on the wooden box, and handed it to Ms. Xiaoguo. Ms. Xiaoguo opened the Buddhist scriptures and just glanced at the scriptures in the book twice. She couldn't put it down and her eyes shone. But in the blink of an eye, Ms. Xiaoguo also discovered the anomaly of this Buddhist scripture. This Buddhist scripture was not copied, but printed, and it was printed extremely beautifully. The words in the scriptures were neatly arranged and the fonts were beautiful. It is pleasing to the eye. There are few Buddhist scriptures on the market that are printed so beautifully. Husband, why is this Buddhist scripture so beautiful? Xiaoping'an smiled slightly and finally revealed the second purpose of his visit to Madame Xiaoguo. Ahem, This is the second thing I came to see Madam today. I have a business here that I want to hand over to the Guo family. With the Guo family in charge, if this business is successful, scholars all over the world can see such exquisite books, and the prices can be even cheaper. The Guo family can become the largest bookseller in the world, and it is easy to make tens of thousands of dollars a day. Ah, what kind of business is this? It's so powerful. Ms. Xiao Guo is not an ordinary woman. As a woman from the Guo family in Taiyuan, she naturally knows how much benefit it will bring to the entire family once the Guo family becomes the largest bookseller in the world. In Wei State, it is not a shameful thing for wealthy families to do business. As long as it can make money, there are many people to do it. Seeing that the pawn shop in the temple can make money, the royal family will open a pawn shop, known as the Emperor's Pawn Shop. Compared with opening a pawn shop, making books Shang-Na is so much better. Madam, this is the business. Xiaopinggan opened a wooden board under his box and saw that under the wooden board were movable wood-carved seals. Those seals were arranged together to form articles. How come these words are one after another and can still be moved? Xiaopinggan casually exchanged the two movable types. Madam is smart, and you can tell at a glance that you should know the secret. As Xiaopinggan explained, Ms. Xiao Guo suddenly understood the mystery of movable type printing. Her eyes sparkled, and the way she looked at Xiaopinggan was completely different. This kind of business is unique in the world. Whoever controls it will have huge profits. Are you really willing to let the country handle it? My wife and I are originally one family. The Kui family, my lineage, and the Guo family are also one, so there is no difference between them. Madam, there is no need to worry about this matter. Madam, if she finds time to go back to the Guo family, I will also write a letter to your father-in-law and let him know what to do. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 526. Before entering the Northern Wei Palace with eunuch Qian beside Tuaba Si, Xiaopinggan raised his head and looked at the sky again. He has been in this world for several years. In the past few years, he has been called into the palace by Tuaba Si many times to ask questions about celestial phenomena and mathematics. The results every time proved that he was right. Tuaba Si was convinced. The entire Northern Wei dynasty, they all regarded him as a godlike existence. In the sky is filled with bright stars, but the star Yinghuo has disappeared. Throughout the capital of the Northern Wei dynasty, from the palace compound to the mansions of high-ranking officials and nobles, countless people were in the courtyard at the moment, like crowing roosters, staring at the sky, feeling uneasy in their hearts. The star Yinghuo suddenly disappeared from the sky last night. In just one day, rumors were already spreading in the capital of the Northern Wei dynasty. Tonight, the star Yinghuo was still not seen in the sky, so Tuaba Si once again invited Xiaopinggan to enter the palace. Ask right. Yinghuo planet is Mars. People who live in later generations may have a hard time imagining how much attention people paid to celestial phenomena in ancient times. If the weather forecasts of later generations, early warnings of various earthquake disasters, political events in various countries, and war intelligence are all added together, their importance is almost as important as people's interpretation of celestial phenomena in this era. The knowledge of interpreting celestial phenomena was called Kijhan in ancient times. The 5 planets of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth plus the sun and moon make the total number 7. The science of studying and observing the signs of changes in these 7 most important celestial bodies is Kijhan. Those who truly master the knowledge of Kijhan are all outstanding people of this era. Master Kui, hurry up, your majesty is worried now. Eunuch Qian led the way and walked quickly, while whispering to Xiaopinggan, the person your majesty trusts most now is Master Kui. The one who opposed the move of the capital last time was Mr. Kui. It turns out that Mr. Kui is right. The disaster passed quickly and the refugees were resettled. The weather will be smooth in the coming year. If His Majesty had listened to those people's nonsense about moving the capital last time, who would be able to live a stable life now? Alas, you said that this Yinghuo star was fine. Why did it suddenly disappear? It made people panic. In one day, there were all kinds of opinions in the city. Your Majesty didn't eat much for dinner today. Eunuch Qian, don't worry. This Yinghuo star has not disappeared, but its trajectory is erratic and sometimes difficult to observe. This omen has nothing to do with our country, Wei. Xiaoping'an said calmly. With Master Kui's words, I feel relieved. Eunuch Qian also breathed a sigh of relief. Soon, Eunuch Qian took Xiaoping'an to a garden in the palace. Tuaba Si was not in the main hall, but in the garden, with his head raised and his brows furrowed, and he was also observing the celestial phenomena. Several doctors and officials from Si Tianjian were all standing beside Tuaba Si tremblingly, one by one. His face looked a little panicked. Yinghuo is an evil star. Yinghuo has strange phenomena and everyone is afraid of it. Seeing Xiaoping'an coming with a normal expression, Tuaba Si felt relieved, and the others also breathed a sigh of relief, as if seeing a savior. Just now Tuaba Si asked Yinghuo what the trajectory was like. Everyone did not dare to speak and could not explain. They were afraid that they would lose their heads if they spoke the wrong words. Master Kui is here, so there is no need to be afraid. The entire Wei Kingdom knows Master Kui's ability and divine machine. In the heart, I am proficient in astronomical and geographical phenomena. If you don't understand, you can ask Mr. Kui. Dr. Yukian and the officials from Si Tianjian quickly saluted Xiaoping'an. When Xiaoping'an came over, those people all backed away and listened obediently. Kui Qing, look at why the Yinghuo star disappeared in the sky. This Yinghuo star is an evil star. Is this a bad omen for our country, Wei? Tuaba Si asked anxiously. Xiaoping'an looked at the sky, his face straightened. Your Majesty, according to the Chun Chiu Zhou Xuan, the gods descended on Xian, and on the day of their arrival, everyone offered sacrifices. Now I will deduce the date. The day when the Yinghuo star disappeared, on the eve of Zhenguo, in the Xinwei dynasty, there were clouds in the sky. In other words, the disappearance of the Yinghuo star was indeed a disaster star coming, and it was a bad omen, but it was a sign of great misfortune. As soon as Xiaoping'an said this, several doctors and Si Tianjian officials all trembled with horror on their faces, and Tuaba Si's face suddenly became extremely ugly. Kui Qing, is there any way to resolve this bad omen? Tuaba Si asked quickly. Your Majesty, don't worry. The Yinghuo star disappeared in Geng and Wei, both of which belong to Qin. This indicates that this disaster has nothing to do with our Wei state, and will be reflected on the land of Qin, that is, the Emperor Yao Xing of the great Qin Empire. Yinghuo it is a fire, and the omen is in the land of Qin. In the coming year, the Qin dynasty may be read for thousands of miles, and swords and soldiers will rise within. Yao Xing is already old. After this chaos, he may not have much time. Xiaoping'an knew that next year, the great Qin Empire would really experience a severe drought that was rare in a century. The country's political situation took a turn for the worse, and rumors spread everywhere. The turmoil failed, and Yao Bai was executed. After a rebellion, the Qin dynasty's vitality was severely damaged. Yao Xing was already in poor health. As a result, his condition suddenly worsened and he died soon after. The Qin dynasty's vitality was not much. Hearing what Xiaoping'an said, Tuaba Si took a long breath and finally felt relieved. It would be fine if he had nothing to do with this kind of thing. However, as soon as he thought about it, Tuaba Si looked serious again and ordered people around said, "You have all heard what Mr. Kui just said. These words are in this imperial garden and are not allowed to leak out. Whoever talks too much will let the queen know. If we track it down, we will chop off whose head it is. Everyone in the garden quickly agreed, not daring to say anything. Twabasi's queen was Yao Xing's daughter. A few years ago, when Rabbit entered the palace, Xiaoping'an divined to Twabasi that Yao Xing would send a princess to him in the coming year. The next year, De Qin indeed sent the princess. Afterwards, Twabasi waved the others away, leaving Xiaoping'an alone to talk in the pavilion in the garden. I heard that Kuiqing was happy with Liner a few days ago. I haven't congratulated Kuiqing yet. In the past 2 years, I have seen that Kuiqing's body is getting stronger day by day, and her complexion is much better than before. I don't know what Kuiqing's health care is. Wonderful method. To be honest, there are many concubines in the palace. Although I am still young, I feel that I am not as good as before. Twabasi actually told Xiaoping'an about the man's troubles. Your Majesty, if you have few desires in your heart, you can maintain your health naturally. I have only suddenly realized this truth in the past 2 years. In the past few years, I have worked hard and written books. I have a poor head and many things to worry about. In the past few years, I have been in my study. A fire broke out, and a fire wiped out decades of hard work. Instead, I looked away, put down the book, and let everything happen. When I had time, I walked around and read great articles about heaven and earth in the mountains, rivers, and lakes, and my health improved. It's... Xiaoping'an said nonsense. Twabasi shook his head, it's a pity, it's a pity. I have long heard that Kuiqing's annotations of the classics are unique in our country of Wei. Unexpectedly, they were burned down. There is a legend that Kuiqing met a strange monk while traveling and was taught. Is the volume of the Mahayana Liwen Universal Light Tibetan Sutra also true? It's true. The strange monk came and went without a trace. It was quite miraculous. He never said his name from the beginning to the end. Later, my wife and I visited temples everywhere, but there was no trace of the strange monk. I now read it every day. After reading the Mahayana Liwen Universal Light Tibetan Sutra, I feel that my secular thoughts have disappeared, my husband and wife are harmonious, I no longer have any desire for fame and wealth, and everything goes as it should. Twabasi originally wanted to talk to Xiaoping'an about destroying the Buddha again, but found that Kuihao was completely unconvinced and was no longer interested in the matter. He looked aloof from the world, so he stopped talking. But when Xiaoping'an left the palace, he asked the eunuchs around him to reward Xiaoping'an with some silk items. Xiaoping'an returned to his study at home. As soon as he sat down, Kui Ming, a disciple of the Kui family, asked to see him. I met my uncle. How did things go? When Kui Ming saw no one around, he took out a cloth bag from his chest, opened it, and handed it to Xiaoping'an. Inside the cloth bag, there was a dark iron pipe as thick as a thumb. How many are produced in a month? According to the method taught by uncle, the iron pipes in the Kui family's workshop can produce 210 iron pipes a month. The farm we recruited from the victims will have a good harvest this year. The uncle gave the land of the farm to the victims. Those victims are willing to serving my Kui family. The cavalry selected from among the young and strong victims of the disaster has entered Ziliang. Xiaoping'an looked at it and nodded slightly, thinking that he finally had the power to protect himself. Everything went as Kuihao expected. In the second year, the Qin state was indeed thousands of miles away, and troubles arose. Twabasi relied more on Kuihao. Several years have passed since Xiaoping'an came to the palace again to interpret the celestial phenomena for Twabasi. In the third year of Taikang, a comet dragged its long tail across the sky for more than 80 days. The comet emerged from the Tianjin star, entered Taiwei, passed through the Baidu, and then passed by Xiwei. Many people had never seen such a celestial phenomenon in their lives, which caused great panic in the northern Wei dynasty. Before this, Many people had never seen such a celestial phenomenon in their lives. A group of doctors and Tianjian officials searched through the classics and finally saw such a record in the classic book of Han. Before Wang Mang usurped the throne, comets came and went. Hearing this, Tuaba Si was frightened and summoned Xiaoping'an to the palace. "Don't worry, Your Majesty. Now the leader of our country, Wei, respects his subordinates, is orderly, and the people have no objections. Therefore, this disaster will not occur in our country of Wei, but will occur in a big country in the south of our country of Wei. That big country has a weak leader Chen Qiang, big changes are about to happen." When Tuaba Si heard this, he breathed a sigh of relief again. The big country in the south with weak rulers and strong ministers was the Jin state. Now in the Jin state, Sima Duan was like a puppet. He had reached his limit. Lu Yu was so powerful. With great achievements, his reputation in the Jin kingdom has reached its peak. When will the big change Kui Qing mentioned happen? Tuaba Si asked. Within 2 years, Xiaoping'an replied affirmatively. I didn't expect that Jin would go down such a path. From what Kui Qing has seen, how can such a disaster be avoided for a country? The ancients said that disasters originate from people. If there are no flaws in human behavior, monsters will not cause it. Therefore, if people have flaws below, disasters will appear in the sky. Heavenly events are constant and will not change for hundreds of generations. Man's blessings and misfortunes are all the same. Come from your own heart. If you want to be free from disaster, always cultivate your virtue and reflect on yourself, do everything flawlessly, and be worthy of the world and the people, there will naturally be no harm. What Kui Qing said is great kindness. After dealing with it, Xiaoping'an walked out of the palace again. He has raised several teams of horse bandits in the past few years. He invested a lot in the past, but he did not expect that now those horse bandits have started to make money. They are running rampant in the north and plundering property, and they have become a powerful force in his hands. Xiaoping'an was thinking about whether to play a big game, completely change history, and get more divine power. Without any warning, the world of this world was suddenly shattered. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 527. At 1:55 p.m. the next day, the weather in Paris was fine. Xiaoping'an arrived at the stronghold of the Order Committee of the 11th District on time 5 minutes ahead of schedule. It was still the same as yesterday, even in broad daylight, when Xiaoping'an's figure changed from transparent to blurry to completely revealed. Fang Lingqian appeared in front of Xiaoping'an immediately. Seeing Xiaoping'an, Fang Lingqian's eyes lit up and she couldn't help but say in her heart, "This guy is still so handsome." Today, Xiaoping'an is wearing the outfit that Emily prepared for him at home, wearing sunglasses and a black tie t-shirt. The black t-shirt is a close-fitting tactical pendant vest, and there are inserts on the left and right sides of the tactical vest. Xiaoping'an wore 2 pieces of his favorite silver Xuanhuan MR98, a short black leather windbreaker, and stab-proof combat boots. The whole person looked neat and stylish. The Xuanhuan MR98 was originally a classic pistol produced in France. Xiaoping'an brought a few pistols to an arms warehouse last time. As he was going on a mission today, Xiaoping'an had 2 of them with him. It has to be said that Emily, who lives in a fashionable metropolis like Paris, has a good sense of aesthetics. Xiaoping'an feels that his disciple will become his life assistant. Everyone is here, just waiting for you. Seeing Xiaoping'an arriving as promised, Fang Lingqian breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She was really worried that Xiaoping'an would disappear with the boundary pearl, or something unexpected would happen. If not, today's mission might be a failure. Entering the underground city of Paris, such a dangerous place, without a strong person above the Six Suns realm is in charge, it really makes people feel a little panicked. The mission is to gather here at 2 o'clock. I'm not late, am I? Xiaoping'an shrugged. No, the people from the dragon group have just arrived, Fang Lingshan said and looked at Xiaopingan again. Xiaopingan's breath was the same as yesterday, but for some reason, she could feel that Xiaopingan seemed to be in a good mood today and was very happy. The whole person is slightly different from yesterday. Of course Xiaopingan is happy, because Kui Hao's world bead has added 64 points of divine power to Xiaopingan. After the fusion last night, the upper limit of Xiaopingan's magical power has become 8068, and there is an additional one in the secret candid. Kui Hao's stargazing sculpture can consume 81 points of divine power to summon Kui Hao. The summoned Kui Hao mastered a very powerful skill that even Xiaopingan envied. He could do divination. Xiaopingan doesn't know if the Kui Hao Jizu he fused is considered a breakthrough fusion, but the new 64-point upper limit of divine power corresponds to the 64 hexagrams and has a special meaning. It should be considered good, or at least a perfect fusion. After receiving the boundary beads from the order committee, Xiaopingan naturally had to take on this task. As he spoke, Fang Lingqian led Xiaopingan into the courtyard of the stronghold. In the yard today, there are several black military bulletproof off-road vehicles with steel nets hanging on them. They look a bit tough. One of the off-road vehicles also has an automatic machine gun and a rocket launcher on the roof. Now in Paris, almost no one dares to offend anyone who can drive such an off-road vehicle. Tupolu, Fang Lingshan, and Li Yunzhou were all dressed in summoner combat uniforms and were chatting with several other people in the yard. Xiaopingan did not see Tupolu's big knife, and the heavy equipment carried by these people was not too much. Fang Lingshan and Li Yunzhou only carried an alloy field knife and a pistol each. Xiaopingan vaguely guessed, among the three of them, one person's secret is frankly integrated with space equipment. Li Yunzhou stood in the sun looking a little sickly, with a smile on his face. He was not in good spirits, as if he had not recovered from the nightmare last night. When Tupolu and Fang Lingshan saw Xiaopingan and thought about their dream last night, their expressions were a little strange. Until this time, they actually still had some feelings about Xiaopingan's dream last night. Doubtful, of course, neither of them told anyone else about their dreams. The people chatting with Tupolu and the others were 5 other people, 4 men and 1 woman. Among the 5 people, 1 was in the 2 Yang realm, 3 in the 3 Yang realm, and 1 in the 5 Yang realm. They also looked fully armed. This combination was almost the size of a small team, and at the same time, those 5 people all have the temperament of an extremely capable summoner, which is obviously different from ordinary summoners. As soon as he saw them, 2 words flashed in Xiaopingan's head: Dragon Group. The Dragon Group is an organization of Chinese summoners. It is powerful and has a large number of people. Because China has a large population, which is several times that of the Great Yan Kingdom, the Chinese Dragon Group, just in terms of size, is smaller than the Order Committee of the Great Yan Kingdom. Several times larger, and more powerful. On this earth, China has the largest number of summoners, the longest inheritance, and the strongest strength, because China is the origin of summoners in this world. It has been studied, a world pearl that has been around for thousands of years. As soon as Xiaopingan followed Fang Lingshan here, the eyes of the 5 people suddenly shifted to Xiaopingan, and their eyes flashed one by one. Fang Lingqian was about to introduce the 5 people to Xiaopingan. Among the 5 people, a muscular man in his 40s with a tigerish aura strode towards Xiaopingan and took the initiative to extend his hand. Luo and hello, sir, let me introduce myself. I am Chen Changming from the Dragon Group, the leader of the Paris Action Group. I am very happy to be in Paris and to meet our Chinese compatriots. Hello, Team Leader Chen. Xiaopingan stretched out his hand and shook it with Chen Changming. Just like when he met Minister Yan before, as soon as the 2 parties shook hands, Chen Changming's divine power surged over him. He wanted to test Xiaopingan's details, but Xiaopingan calmly forced Chen Changming's magical power back. It is said that hearing is false and seeing is believing. After such a test, Chen Changming immediately confirmed Xiaopinggan's identity and strength. This strength cannot be faked at all. It is true. At least a summoner above the 6 Yang realm can be so relaxed. Chen Changming waved his hand, and the summoners from the other 4 dragon groups gathered around him. Chen Changming introduced the other 4 people to Xiaopinggan. One of those 4 people was named Lu Xiong, one was named Yang Xiaodong, one was named Xiao Tong, and the woman was named Su Xiao. Has short hair, but a very beautiful face, and a delicate beauty peak on her forehead. Xiaopinggan's strength lies here, so these dragon team members are very respectful to Xiaopinggan. Mr. Luo, after learning the news that you were in Paris, we immediately contacted Mr. Luoan's family and reported to them that he was safe. They were very happy to know that Mr. Luo was still alive. This time we came to Paris to perform our mission. I have one more thing to give to Mr. Luo. Chen Changming said, and when he moved his hand, there were 2 more letters in his hand. Mr. Luo, these are letters written to you by your father and mother. They were just transferred from China. Come, let me hand it over on your behalf. Xiaopinggan took the 2 letters. This dragon group was really powerful. As soon as they met, they started to unite. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 528. The engines of several subs were roaring and speeding through the streets of Paris. The vehicles were passing by at high speed, and the fallen leaves of the plane trees on the ground were spinning and rolling on the streets. Some gangsters riding motorcycles on the street shrank their heads when they saw the convoy, not daring to cause trouble. At this moment in Paris, those who can drive such a murderous car swaggering through the city are not ordinary people, and ordinary people are looking for death. Xiaopinggan was sitting in the back seat of the car in the middle. Tu Polu was driving the car, and Fang Lingyu was sitting next to Xiaopinggan. Tu Polu was concentrating on driving. Fang Lingyu glanced at Xiaopinggan sitting next to him from time to time. Xiaopinggan was holding the letter in his hand and looking at it. He rubbed his face with one hand, and the expression on his face was half smiling but not smiling. The letter was written by Luoan's parents. It contained various concerns and greetings, and also mentioned some of the current situation of the 2 of them. After learning that Luoan became a summoner in China, according to the laws of China, Luoan's parents enjoyed a lot of preferential treatment. For example, Luoan's father was very happy because as a direct relative of the summoner, one of the preferential treatment he enjoyed was a 50% reduction in personal income tax. Luoan's mother enjoyed a special subsidy from the government, and Luoan's grandfather was sent to a government senior nursing home, etc. In China, it is true that one person becomes a summoner and the whole family is honored. This is really true. Although Luoan's parents have divorced and started their own families, because of Luoan, the 2 of them can still enjoy a lot because their son is a summoner. The benefits it brings are not only a huge honor for ordinary families, but also bring many practical benefits, which can make people around them extremely envious. There were 2 letters, one for each of Luoan's parents. At the end of the letter, both of them asked Luoan to go back to China to visit them if he had time. Luoan's father introduced Luoan to his half-brother. Both younger brothers were proud of him as the summoner brother, and Luoan's mother also introduced him to his half-brother and sister, how cute they were, and so on. Xiaopinggan still has some memories and images left by Luoan in his mind. Luoan's memory of his parents has been a little blurry. After the 2 divorced, there is not much support for Luoan. Luoan's father has no support for Luoan. And also tried her best to take care of her. As for Luoan's mother, because she usually didn't have much income and her financial conditions were not generous, she rarely saw her. As for Luoan's half-brothers and sisters in China, in Luoan's images, he had met them several times many years ago, but the feeling of those few meetings was not very good. He was quite indifferent, and Luoan wouldn't cause any trouble. Luoan didn't hear anyone call him brother, but he saw a lot of blank stares. If Luoan hadn't no longer been nostalgic for his family in China, he wouldn't have wanted to study painting abroad so much. Xiaopinggan didn't know how to deal with this sudden family warmth for a while. He could only smile bitterly, shook his head, and received the 2 opened letters into his space warehouse. I am using the body that Luoan left behind. The preferential treatment Luoan's parents received should be regarded as my reward for Luoan's parents. There is no need to meet Luoan's parents. If there is a chance, just give Luoan's parents some money. As ordinary people, in family, money is the most real and important thing. Well, in history, summoners from China have sacrificed the most for the country. China has many preferential treatment policies for summoners. Do you have any plans to return to China? Seeing Xiaopinggan put away the letter, Fang Lingqian next to him asked tentatively. One sentence. Everyone can see that the Dragon Group and Huaxia are wooing Luoan. Summoners above the 6th element realm are high-end talents everywhere. The Order Committee also wants to woo Luoan. This mission in Paris is considered to be a test of contact between the two parties. Luoan is originally from China, so the Order Committee can only watch and do nothing about the Dragon Group's conspiracy. But fortunately, Luoan still has a cooperative relationship with the Order Committee and is working for the Order Committee. Live, it can be regarded as the foreign aid of the Order Committee, and the Order Committee still has advantages. I don't plan to go back for the time being. When this mission is over, I will just send some money to my family in China so that they can live a good life. It doesn't matter whether I go back or not. Xiaopinggan said with a shrug. Hearing what Xiaopinggan said, Fang Lingqian breathed a sigh of relief, and said with some emotion and meaning, for a powerful summoner, ordinary native families are often just ties. Bringing those ordinary people into our world is not necessarily a good thing. Sometimes it may bring harm to them. You should understand what I mean. It is better to keep a little distance. Yes, Xiaopinggan nodded with deep sympathy, they are too fragile, and our world is too dangerous. The daily life we are accustomed to may be a disaster for them, by the way. Ping'an suddenly thought of something and suddenly changed the topic. Have the monsters in China been eliminated? The monsters in the big cities have been basically eliminated. Only some monsters in the mountainous areas of western China and the wilderness in the north are still being suppressed because they are hidden deeper. In the past 2 years, domestic order in China has also been gradually restored. The Luo Wilderness is an ancient place name in Siberia. China occupies about 3/5 of the Luo Wilderness on this planet, and the remaining 2/5 is Siberia in Russia. This is all inherited from the history of this world. There is no border dispute between the two sides. Xiaopinggan nodded. After reading these 2 letters in the car and chatting with Fang Lingqian for a few words, several subs stopped in the eastern suburbs of Paris with a burst of braking. We're here. Fang Lingqian opened the door and got out of the car. Xiaopinggan also got out of the car. Where the car stopped, within 1 square kilometer, there were already charred and collapsed ruins of houses. As soon as he got off the car, Xiaopinggan saw a large crater left by a meteorite impact on the ground here. Under the crater was a collapsed and abandoned underground shelter. Connected to the shelter were the tracks of the Paris subway, and several red birds. The squinting wild dog saw the people getting out of the car and ran away quickly. In broad daylight, the surrounding area was deserted, with a dead air, no one dared to come, and the surrounding air was inexplicably cold. The shelter has also been turned into an underground ruin. The rails of the nearby subway that are connected to the shelter are twisted like twists in the broken tunnel, revealing the dissolved remains, which are completely shapeless. Among the ruins of the big pit, some human bone fragments can also be vaguely seen. Among the rocks at Xiaopinggan's feet, there was a burnt teddy bear covered in dust. There were some debris scattered on the ground around it. You can imagine the tragedy here at that time. On the day of the catastrophe, this place was hit by a meteorite. None of the more than 12,000 people in the shelter survived. A nearby town was also completely wiped out by the shockwave of the meteorite explosion. According to what we have learned before, according to the intelligence, Sasha and the Doomsday Gang once had abnormal activities here. Let's go in from here. Fang Lingqian said, taking the lead down the pit, and everyone around him followed suit. Click, click, as you walk down the slope of the ruins into the tunnel, you will step on broken bones from time to time, making a clicking sound. At the bottom of the big pit, there is a huge hole that connects to the lower subway. Huge broken and dissolved steel components are exposed at the bottom of the tunnel, already stained with rust. In the blink of an eye, everyone entered the dark subway passage, and the surroundings began to become dark. Xiaopingan waved his hand and summoned a firefly flying in front, 5 elite slave soldiers, and a black dragon. The fireflies flying in the air suddenly brightened the light in the cave, and the 5 elite slave soldiers held Chang'e and opened the way in front, and the black dragon followed the 5. Behind an elite slave soldier. Seeing what Xiaopingan summoned, the others didn't think there was anything special, but Tupolu and Fang Lingshan were shocked. In the darkness, looking at the suddenly exciting faces of Fang Lingshan and Tupolu, Xiaopingan blinked at them respectively. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 529. If there was no one else in the tunnel at this time, Tupolu and Fang Lingshan might both pull Luoan aside and ask him about it. It's so shocking. Is it a coincidence? If it's not a coincidence, how can we explain the dream last night? How did Xiaopingan know Luoan? This question is puzzling, but it is not the key. What is more important is, how can Xiaopingan entrust them with dreams and appear in their dreams? According to legend, only the dead can entrust dreams. Could it be that Xiaopingan has? Tupolu and Fang Lingshan were confused, and their hearts were shocked beyond words. However, at this time, it was indeed not the time to ask questions. They could only put the matter in their hearts, summon 2 slave soldiers each, and continued to follow. The team searched inside the tunnel. Li Yunzhou, a bit of a coquettish guy, summoned 4 warriors wearing leather armor with shields and daggers, 1 on each side, 1 on the left, 1 on the left, and they looked like they were ready to protect him at any time, even if they were afraid of death, which made Fang Lingshan turn over for him. He rolled his eyes a few times and thought he was embarrassed. Except for Xiaopingan, after entering the tunnel, everyone also summoned their own things at this time. Of course, this is not to worry about Xiaopingan, but for the summoner, in this environment, there are 1 or 2 your summons can respond faster, and you will feel more at ease and at ease. Fang Lingqian also summoned 2 slave soldiers. At the same time, he gave 2 slave soldiers 2 instruments for detecting nuclear radiation. He asked the 2 slave soldiers to walk among the people with the detectors and check the tunnels at any time. Case. The detector makes a hissing sound in the tunnel, just like radio noise. If there is abnormal reaction of radiation in the surroundings, the detector will issue an audible warning. Chen Changming of the Dragon Group summoned 2 tigers, one behind the other, to follow the team. Several other members of the Dragon team also summoned slave soldiers, archers, and wild wolves to follow the team. Yang Xiaodong of the Dragon Group also brought 2 radiation detectors to the elite slave soldiers he summoned and followed the team. In this way, the 4 instruments were working sizzlingly. As long as there was an abnormality in radiation, they would not be detected. It may not be discovered. Everyone turned on the advent light on their summoned objects, and a faint red light emitted from these summoned objects, which looked particularly bright in the dark underground. At least it no longer had the gloomy feeling before. Summoners wearing modern clothes, warriors from different dynasties, slave soldiers, and various animals, the combination of this team is also amazing. Xiaopinggan had already summoned the god of fortune boy, who was running around naughtily in the team, disappearing and appearing without anyone noticing. In the tunnel, you can see some scattered human skeletons from time to time. The skulls, tibias, etc. of those skeletons are shattered, and you can see horrific holes and lacerations on the skeletons. As an experienced summoner, you can see what those skeletons were like when they were alive. After being attacked by demonic rats, broken helmets, walkie-talkies, bullet casings and other items scattered on the ground could be seen on some of the skeletons. As for bullet holes on the walls on both sides of the tunnel, they could be seen everywhere. There were almost hundreds of scattered skeletons, and there were some skeletons. You could tell at a glance that they belonged to demon rats. Many human bones and demon rat skeletons were mixed together. It can be imagined that the fighting here at that time must have been very intense. Fierce. These skeletons were left behind by the French army. To be able to fight monsters here, these French soldiers are actually very courageous. Fang Lingyu said softly. Well, the walls here are scorched black on both sides, with traces of high-temperature burns. The French army should have used flamethrowers here, or detonated high-energy incendiary bombs. Chen Changming glanced at the walls on both sides of the tunnel. The Requiem ritual has been performed here. There should be sacrifices from the army before. Xiaopingyan felt the specialness of those bones as soon as he scanned the bones. Skeletons that had the Requiem ritual performed, even in such a tunnel after moderate decay, the bones will not turn black or moldy, but will reveal a white texture and look very clean. After crossing the skeleton area and not walking very far in the tunnel, which was less than 3 or 4 kilometers, Xiaopingyan discovered several dark holes as thick as buckets on the wall on one side of the underground tunnel. Outside the entrance of the cave, there is a pile of fine sand on the ground of the tunnel. The black dragon barked several times at the entrances of the caves. Xiaopingyan immediately knew what the black dragon meant. The entrances to the caves smelled like monsters, and they were sandworms. Everyone, please pay attention, there are sandworms in this pothole, Xiaopingyan reminded. Fang Lingqian summoned the detector and walked around the sandworm's hole. The detector's sound indicators were normal, proving that there was nothing in the sandworm's hole. In fact, when he saw those 2 holes, the lucky boy had already drilled in, went several hundred meters deep, and wandered around inside. There was indeed nothing inside, except for 2 sandworms sleeping in the holes. The sandworm was particularly sensitive to sound. As soon as everyone came here, the sandworm sleeping inside was suddenly awakened by the sound on the ground and began to run up along the entrance of the hole. When the sandworms move, you can hear the sound of rustling coming from the dark holes as big as buckets. Chao Tong, you stay and deal with the sandworms below, and everyone continues to search. Everyone did not stop and continued to search forward. Only Chao Tong of the dragon group stayed behind. They were just 2 sandworms, which was nothing to the summoners present. Everyone continued to walk forward, and after walking a few dozen meters, there was a fluctuating aura of divine power behind them, and a scorching fire light lit up. The sandworms that emerged from below turned into ashes in the tunnel. Chao Tong has quickly followed the team. Unfortunately, there is no boundary bead. In this kind of task, if you get a boundary bead, it will be distributed uniformly among everyone, and there is no need to turn it over. Generally speaking, the person with the most merit will pick first. If there is not enough points, the boundary bead will be exchanged for money to settle the settlement. Along the tunnel, there were many damaged subway stations, and many abandoned underground shelters were connected to both sides of the tunnel. Xiaopingyan and the others followed the tunnel, searching for shelters one by one, and occasionally encountered them along the way. Several sandworms were easily eliminated by Xiaopingyan and the others. A group of people went underground around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. A few hours later, when the sky outside gradually darkened, the number of sandworms in the tunnel seemed to begin to increase. Xiaopingan and the others had just finished inspecting an abandoned shelter that was about the size of a basketball gym, and were about to evacuate from the shelter when the cry of Li Yunzhou, who was on guard outside the shelter, suddenly came in. Magic rats, so many magic rats. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 530. Ta da 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 da. In addition to Li Yunzhou's shout, gunfire rang out outside. Xiaopingan rushed out of the shelter almost immediately and came to the tunnel outside. The dark tunnel was filled with dense blood-red dots at some point. Those red dots were the ferocious eyes of the demon rat. There was a rustling sound throughout the tunnel. In the collapse of the tunnel a few hundred meters away and at the entrance to an unchecked shelter in front of it, as well as several holes made by sandworms, countless demon rats emerged from the ground, like black tides, heading towards it, surging over here, making people's scalp numb. The shooter was Li Yunzhou. This guy held an assault rifle in his hand and was shooting at the demon rats in the tunnel. Shooting at this time, the gunshot was actually the best way to remind everyone that the demon rats were coming. Some of the demon rats that rushed over were hit by bullets and fell to the ground, but they were still struggling and not dead. The demon rats behind continued to rush over. In an instant, the ground of the tunnel, the walls on both sides, and even the tunnel were covered with bullets. On the top, there are figures of magic rats. Those demonic rats were moving around, dodging attacks nimbly and rushing towards the side. Everyone's summons had already rushed forward and started fighting with the demon rats. The elite slave soldiers summoned by Xiaopingan were throwing javelins one after another, pushing the charging demon rats to the ground, but there were too many demon rats, and the few elite slave soldiers who rushed forward were after throwing the spear. He rushed forward with his long arm and fought with the magic rats in the tunnel. The archers, slave soldiers, tigers, and wolves summoned by others also roared, rushed forward, formed a line of defense, and fought with the demon rats. In an instant, the entire underground tunnel was filled with the piercing sharp tips of the demon rats. Screams and splatters of blood. Others also rushed out of the shelter and were surprised to see so many demon rats. How come there are so many demon rats in the underground of Paris? Fang Lingqian screamed, and then threw a fireball, turning a demon rat that rushed to the front into ashes. Chen Changming waved his hand, and several ice picks were shot out, and several demon rats were pinned to the ground. There were too many demon rats. The tiger he summoned was already surrounded by several demon rats after killing 2 demon rats. Turned into light and dissipated in the blink of an eye, and another tiger also fell into the surrounding of the demon rats in the blink of an eye. The other slave soldiers were already crumbling at this time. Only the elite slave soldiers summoned by Xiaopingan still showed extraordinary combat effectiveness. The 5 elite slave soldiers formed a battle formation, like petals of a flower, tightly leaning on each other. Together, the 5 slave soldiers covered each other and cooperated, both offensively and defensively. As the Changji stabbed out powerfully and indifferently like a machine, the demon rats that rushed in front of the 5 elite slave soldiers were all killed by Xiaopingan's. The elite slave soldier's Changji was pierced and he fell down. In a moment, the pile of demon rats that fell in front of the 5 elite slave soldiers was more than 1 meter high. The demon rats in the back stepped on the corpse of the demon rats in front and kept rushing towards them. The 5 elite slave soldiers were fighting while advancing and retreating in an orderly manner. The long swords in their hands were still stabbing out powerfully, like a blooming flower of thorns. This scene made everyone else's eyes widen. Yes, compared with the elite slave soldiers summoned by others, the elite slave soldiers summoned by Xiaopingan are obviously different from the slave soldiers summoned by others in terms of intelligence, combat power, and tacit understanding of coordination. Yang Xiaodong of the Dragon Group also summoned elite slave soldiers, but after assassinating several demon rats, the elite slave soldiers he summoned did not last long before dissipating. In the eyes of others, the elite slave soldiers summoned by Xiaopingan did not look like slave soldiers at all, but like summons from other powerful military services. The black dragon has retreated. Damn, where did these demon rats come from? Tupolu had already taken out his sword. As he spoke, the sword in his hand had killed 5 demon rats neatly, but demon rats kept rushing out, and Tupolu could only retreat temporarily. Several people in the dragon group had assault rifles in their hands and were firing at the demon rats. The dense bullets beat the forward demon rats to pieces. Groups of blood flowers continued to erupt. More and more demonic rats were coming in front of them, forcing everyone to retreat. Fireballs and ice picks from the crowd kept flying towards the demonic rats. The magic lights in the tunnel were colorful, mixed with the gunshots, and separated. It's fierce outside, but it can't stop these demon rats. Xiaoping'an didn't say anything. He was fighting extremely calmly. With a wave of his hand, more than a dozen ice picks flew out and pinned more than a dozen magic rats rushing towards Fang Lingshan to the ground, covering Fang Lingshan's retreat. Coming over, Fang Lingshan took a deep look at him. The God of Fortune boy was not idle at this time. When the demon rats rushed out and received Xiaoping'an's order, the God of Fortune boy had quickly circled around the surrounding tunnels and caves and found a lot of useful information. There was a large pit underground in the collapsed shelter in front, and it was from that pit that most of the demonic rats emerged. Beyond the front, more than 5,000 meters behind everyone, several sandworms suddenly emerged from the ground and made several large holes under the tunnel. A large area of the tunnel underground suddenly collapsed, one after another. The demon rat, demon fire spider and demon liquid spider emerged from the hole and were approaching the crowd. While Xiaoping'an was fighting, he kept an eye on all directions and grasped the situation on the battlefield through the God of Fortune. Interestingly, these monsters actually surrounded this team in the tunnel. There are a large number of magic rats and some magic fire spiders coming from behind the tunnel. We are surrounded. Su Xiao from the dragon group said calmly, his figure dodging and jumping flexibly in the tunnel, holding a handful of light in his hand. The flashing long sword was piercing through the eye of a demon rat. The long sword entered the brain and killed the demon rat in one stroke. As soon as Su Xiao opened his mouth, Xiaoping'an knew that Su Xiao also had remote viewing ability. This remote viewing ability seems to be related to some mysterious genes in the body. It is an innate ability. Thinking of the nostalgic remote viewing ability, Xiaoping'an also sighed in his heart. This body of his, Luoan, the qualifications were too ordinary. He originally thought that his remote viewing ability would come back after the spirit body merged with this body. Unexpectedly, Luoan's body seemed not to support remote viewing at all. It would be much more convenient if this body had remote viewing. Interesting, these beasts actually set up traps to make dumplings for us. Chen Changming was extremely calm. As an elite member of the dragon group, this scene seemed to have put everyone in a desperate situation, but it still couldn't scare him. They still had the means and combat power have not been revealed. You all deal with the monsters at the back of the tunnel. Leave the monster rats in front of the tunnel to me. At the critical moment, Xiaoping'an spoke. He was responsible for dealing with the monsters in front of the tunnel, which greatly reduced the pressure on everyone. In this way, everyone only needs to concentrate on dealing with the monsters behind the tunnel. Having just seen the extremely powerful elite slave soldiers summoned by Xiaoping'an, no one has any doubts about Luoan's strength. Everyone was a well-trained elite, and almost in the blink of an eye, they tacitly agreed to leave the battlefield in front of the tunnel to Xiaoping'an. A group of people rushed towards the back of the tunnel to snipe the monsters rushing from behind the tunnel. The space in the tunnel is limited, and the monsters cannot be allowed to join forces here and compress everyone into this small space. Therefore, although the monsters behind the tunnel have not yet appeared, everyone has already taken the initiative and prepared to intercept them. Everyone had just ran more than 100 meters when they heard a dull but sharp sound of piercing the sky from behind, like thousands of arrows piercing the sky in the thunderous sky. Everyone couldn't help but look back and saw a huge turret in Xiaoping'an's hand. The barrel of the turret rotated, and lines of fire came from the turret in Xiaoping's hand. Shooting out, the ferocious demon rats that rushed over fell one by one like wheat in the field in front of Xiaoping. One bullet could penetrate 3 or 4 demon rats and explode the bodies of those demon rats into flesh and blood. Flying sideways, fragmented, as fragile as a rabbit in front of an old hunter. In this straight tunnel, targets are highly concentrated, and the turret in Xiaoping's hands can exert terrifying lethality. Damn it! Until this time, the 5 elite slave soldiers summoned by Xiaoping were still alive and still protecting him. The 5 elite slave soldiers formed a formation to protect Xiaoping. Chang Ji stretched forward and pointed his sharp weapon at the demon rats that wanted to rush over but couldn't. Blah blah blah. A piece of copper bullet casing kept falling down like running water next to Xiaoping, falling in the tunnel. The flash of the turret made Xiaoping's handsome figure and face sculptured in the dark tunnel into a particularly freehand and three-dimensional way. Just one word to describe handsome. Xiaoping held the turret. Instead of staying in place, he walked towards the demon rat step by step. Under his feet, he stepped on the crushed flesh and bones of the demon rats, and directly beat the demon rats that came in like a tide, just like a cage. Like a quail, it began to scream and retreat in panic. The strong sense of oppression and suffocation made even the demon rat feel a desperate emotion. Abnormal. Tupola couldn't help but muttered. He looked at the big knife in his hand. Before, he thought that the big knife like a door panel in his hand was very masculine, very powerful, and a representative of male power. But at this moment, compared with the turret Xiaoping was holding, Tupola felt for the first time in so many years that he felt like a bit of a sissy, his grandma's.